Okay folks, we're here today with our small boat restoration 1963 Alcort Sunfish CHIP. We've had her since 2013. Got her all fixed up last year with the fairing and primer, paint, new bottom, sealed up seams, and she's been through her first season, her first hurricane, so we wanted to come back and do an air leak test to see how everything held up. And after about 9 months of the paint being on, if we've got in the sealant, see if we have any areas that need to be addressed. So we did an air leak test, put some low volume, low pressure air into the drain plugs, and found a few small leaks along the seam under the rub strip, probably from fastener holes that went in. We could have probably prevented that. We're talking about maybe 5 or 6 areas out of the whole 30 feet of deck seam. I could have prevented that, maybe put a little epoxy or varnish on the screw into the pilot hole before we installed it. A few leaks up at the bow. There's a lot of stuff happening up at the bow though. We've got a plank coming in from either side, deck, hull, a wooden stem underneath, and a longeron on the deck. Another longeron in the keel coming in, so we're gonna clean that up a little bit, apply some thickened epoxy to seal up the little small bits we had. Now keep in mind, we're putting air in from inside, pushing air out through any pass that might have had to escape, and water's about 6 pounds per square inch. I'm not sure, didn't measure the PSI of the air going in, but my guess is it was probably more than 6 pounds. So a couple things. We've sailed the boat and had no leaks from water coming in from the outside, so we're just going to be extra careful, get these things sealed up. And some of the wood, when it gets wet, will also swell, but with the plywood, you don't really want that. You want your plywood to be sealed up and stable. I want to talk real quick about on the back here. These decks are made from fir plywood. You might be able to see the seam. It's about a 1/4 inch thick, and when you get to be almost 60 years old, you start to get some what's called checking in the top. These little bits you hear where this veneer of wood is actually spread apart a bit. So there's probably 3 to 5 veneers of wood in here with glue in between. So when that spreads, that means moisture could get down in there, create more of the same type of thing. And or if there was any other checking below or grain wise fractures, so air at one point can work its way out. And we did see a few little spots like that, once again forcing air from inside, probably at well more than 6 pounds per square inch. So a couple things we want to address is we want to fill in these little grooves, and we've chosen to fill versus sand and get rid of completely. Because once you sand this layer, it's gone, and unless you fiberglass the deck or something, then it's a game you'll lose at eventually. You'll run out of plywood to sand through. So we're going to get it scuffed up, and we're going to fill these little voids with thickened epoxy. We're just going to take we're scuffing the deck, and we're going to take a spreader and put a thin layer of epoxy in there, fill it, so when it gets more primer and paint, it'll essentially be a smooth surface on the top. So we've done one little area where we've scuffed it with 80 grit, and you can see where some areas are smooth and some are not. Once again, like you say, you could keep sanding until you got completely smooth, but we're not going to do that. We just want to get this area scuffed so it has some tooth to grip the next type of coating we put on it, which is the next thing is going to be a thin bits of thickened epoxy. And it's the same type of sanding we would do between coats of primer or paint. And we would not use 80 grit though. We'd probably use 120 or maybe 220. So that's a term Captain Jack taught us. We give it some tooth for the next coat. So that way across the whole surface you've got something for the next coating to apply to. So I'm going to do this one little section over here, because the other benefit you get from where you see it's kind of the dull finish that this sander has created versus this shiny finish is it lets you see when you put your next coat of primer or paint on what's been primed and what's been painted. Gives you something to work with. So here comes the sander. So cover your ears a minute, turn your volume down and mute for a second. Now we've got these same scuffed areas, and once again we're going to address the little valleys that are left behind from checking with some thickened epoxy. We're going to use Thixo to fill that and seal it, and then prime and get another coat of paint. We like leaving these finishes if we can. This is not even a year old, because we'll just build and build and build primer and paint to get a nice nice finish back on here, both protective and cosmetic. Hope y'all are doing great. Chip says hi, and we'll talk to you soon.